Thank you for listening to The Afternoon Pint. We are an independent podcast and we need your support. Please take a moment to hit that like, follow, and share button. Email us if you have an idea or suggestion for the show. Please send your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome to The Afternoon Pint. That was a record extension. The cheers.
Record cheers.
So I'm Mike Tobin.
I am Matt Conrad, and who do we have here?
I am Darrell Dexter.
Darrell Dexter,
That name sounds familiar.
former Premier of Nova Scotia.
Very former. I was the 27th. I think they're up to 30 now, aren't they? Or 31.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know what, though, Darrell, I got to say, you are officially, like, I don't know if you're familiar with, like, Marvel or anything, but you are kind of the last Infinity Stone of premiers because we've had the two other colors on, and we are completing the Infinity Stone gauntlet now with premiers of colors.
Were you the first NDP Premier?
And only.
Well, this is a very interesting little thing that happens when people say to me, well, you were the first NDP Premier from Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. No, that's not true.
No?
The first NDP Premier from Nova Scotia was Alan Blakeney. Now, he was the Premier of Saskatchewan, but he was from, and here we are in Bridgewater. He was from from Bridgewater.
Oh, there you
grew
go.
up here and of course went to law school, was a Rhodes Scholar, and then went on to work for Tommy Douglas in Saskatchewan,
Wow.
and then
That's awesome.
eventually became the Premier of Saskatchewan. But for years and years and years, he would run a place down here on the Dublin shore, and when I was in political life, I would go down and sit on the veranda with him and talk to him about approaches to government and how you go about structuring a cabinet or how you deal with very difficult issues. And he was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful Democrat. He believed so intently and intensely in the democratic process, and of course won it. New Democrats. I mean, when he was active originally, he would have been at the time of the CCF. So, he saw that whole change from the CCF to the NDP, and just a remarkable guy. And from Bridgewater. So I was the first NDP Premier
In Nova Scotia.
of Nova Scotia, but not from Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So with that, you said we're in Bridgewater.
Bridgewater, yeah.
So we're going to give, you actually requested this place. So this is the local public house in Bridgewater.
It's in a mall?
It's in the mall, but you know what? You never know because this is a cool little scenery. Like it's like a library with
Is
the
it a
natural light coming
24-hour Shoppers Drug Mart across? I was wondering if you had a few too many drinks, you could go over and get your Gatorade before you went home. That'd be kind of a neat feature.
Mark's Work Warehouse is actually across the
Oh, sorry.
and then Winners and
Okay,
Shoppers
it's over there,
down
is it?
the other way.
Yeah.
No, it's a great little location. I often come here when I'm seeing people for lunch. The food is good.
Cool.
It's a great little location. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it is.
And we got some local beers. Contest winner, Tanner's.
That's Tanner's. You get the IPA.
The IPA.
I get the Tanner's Alt.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a salute back to my days in Cole Harbour and Dartmouth, and it's Nine Locks Dirty Blonde.
Yeah, that's still maybe one of the best performing breweries we got going on in Nova Scotia. Like it's doing really well.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had their watermelon ale that they put out during the summer.
Yeah.
That is just flat out delicious.
My spouse, she's a big fan of that one. All their fruity beers, right?
Yeah, but that one in particular,
Yeah,
because
you're a
it's
fan?
nice and light, and it's just if you're out in the sun in the summer. So I thoroughly recommend it.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we'll kind of start with the big question. Matt and I were talking about getting you on. It's like, well, we asked Darrell like Dexter, because I mean, we're really happy you're here, and we remember how popular you were almost immediately. Upon getting elected. I mean, you had a pretty well, like I'd say, the majority of voters.
The majority, yeah.
And then one term.
Yeah.
And then you weren't the most popular man anymore, right? I don't know how to say that.
Politics is a fickle business.
100%.
And at that time, what was interesting is like all the premiers in Atlantic Canada were kind of one term.
Yeah.
Sean Graham was one term, and then David Allward was one term, and it just kept...
Rodney was half.
They just kept flipping over one right after the other, and I think it was like October of 2000... we got elected in October, or in 2009 in June. October of 2008, the entire financial world went into collapse, melted down. Yeah. There was huge amount of fear and discontent, and there was a lot of uncertainty in the world, and I think people were feeling that anxiety, and they were looking for something that was somewhat ephemeral. It was very difficult to kind of get your arms around, and I think that one of the things that I wish we had found a way to communicate better, because the narrative that developed was that we were just like other governments, that there was no real change, that we were just like the previous conservative or liberal governments, and I just felt that was like fundamentally not true. I mean, our approach to government was very, very different. Just as an example, when I set up a Premier's Economic Council, I divided it in thirds. I had, 1/3 from business, 1/3 from labor, and then 1/3 were community-based people, because I wanted a broader spectrum to understand a broader spectrum of the economy, not just, what I considered an overly narrow view. Internally, we had, a clear policy framework that we worked off of. We were doing planning. We understood that there was no money, because not only did the financial collapse happen, but the Sable offshore came to an end as well, and the previous Conservative government had gotten almost $1 billion in royalties from the offshore, much of which they used to build program funding. Used as program funding, which meant one of the first things we had to do was kind of backfill all of that program spending. So it meant we really just had little or no money to kind of do the kind of new big things that we would have liked to have done. So a lot of our emphasis was on policy.
Right.
And how do we go about bringing about new kind of long-lasting policy infrastructure that will make the province a better place. And we did that in immigration, we did that in natural resource extraction, we did that in economic development, and of course the one that kind of stuck to people was the economic development piece.
I'll ask you a funny question. Did you predict your time would be short in office, or did you think that you were going to be there for a while?
Well, I mean, people ask me sometimes, what made you a politician? And I say, well, there's two things, right? Two necessary attributes that I felt I had. And one was an overdeveloped sense of optimism and an underdeveloped sense of fear. And so when you're in that position, you're optimistic about that, and there are things that you can do and control, and then there are things that you cannot control. And so you try to control the things that you can. And when it came to economic development, we worked so hard to make sure that the Ship Start Here program, and that whole, we want to be the shipbuilders for the country, that we wanted to win the federal government defense contract to expand Irving shipyards. And you should remember that Irving shipyards at the time had about 500 people working there. I think they have 3,600 there now. So just the impact, and I used to say to people, like, getting that project, despite the fact that we're investing quite a lot of money in it, because we invested a lot of money, it will be the equivalent of winning the Olympics every year for 20 years. And it turns out now that it's going to be well more than 20 years. And especially with the renewed kind of focus on defense spending, the fact that the Irving shipyard is the cornerstone of the defense industry in Atlantic Canada means that the opportunities for this province and for this region, given the new focus, is just kind of exponentially greater than it would have otherwise been. So that turned out, I think, importantly. We invested in making sure that the Port Hawkesbury mill would continue to operate. We couldn't save Bowwaters. We wanted to. We tried. We couldn't save Bowwaters, but we did save Port Hawkesbury. Ron Stern, who took over from NewPage, called me 2 years ago to say that I had said to him at the time, in order for Nova Scotians to get their money back from our investment in in Port Hawkesbury, they would have to operate for 10 years. And I was counting on him to do that. And he called me to say that 10 years was up, that they had repaid, every cent that the province had given them, and that they were now investing to ensure that Port Hawkesbury was going to be there for another 10 years.
Okay.
So
those are the stories you want to hear.
So those are the so those kind of things. In retrospect, people at the time, they just see money going to big companies. That's the narrative, but now when you have the opportunity to look back and you say, oh, well, wait a second, we made an enormous amount of tax revenue out of those endeavors, money that would be used to support healthcare, to support education, and importantly, all these jobs are good family supporting jobs.
Right.
Like, these are jobs where the people who have them are going to be able to buy a home. They're going to have a decent quality of life. So that was the important measure for me. And I remember talking to my kind of long-term friend about this, Mike Savage, who you would
he's
would
been on
know.
the show. Yeah.
Well, Mike and I went to university together.
Oh, cool.
And have known each other all our lives. Mm-hmm. And of course, the Savage government was one term as well.
Yeah.
And he said, and I agree with him, that the length of time in office is not necessarily representative of the success of the government, because other things happened.
That's what I was going to almost ask is, like, would you say that the statement is true then that the government's legacy is probably not really going to be fully known until like a decade or so later? Because, I mean, I'll say it for you, just so you don't have to say it, but the Houston government right now is I know they have had back-to-back governments, but they're in a situation where they just had an election a year and a half ago, very popularly voted in, and now they're in a situation where they are not looking so popular in a lot of aspects in the world, so, in our province. Could they end up be at a similar thing? Like, will we not know the investments that maybe even Houston has done or what you have done until decades later?
Yeah, sure. And as you may know, one of the other things that I do these days, other than vice chair of global public affairs, I should have probably said that earlier. My firm would like me to say that.
Yeah.
And we're a large government relations public affairs firms, and we have offices from coast to coast. But one of the other things I do is I was teaching at the McEachern Institute, public policy and governance. And I tell people that, generally speaking, it's one of those things that you can't kind of pigeonhole. But generally speaking, governments fall into two categories. Mm-hmm. They are either transactional in nature or they are transformational in nature. And if you're transformational in nature, you can sometimes be transactional. But if you're transactional, it's much more difficult to go the other way, to be transformational. I like to think that was our approach. It was a transformational approach to government. And I think that what's interesting about, and this is where people can argue about this thing, I think the approach that the Houston government took was to try and be transformational. Mm-hmm. And so you look at things like the Health Innovation Hub.
Right.
I think that has the power to be transformational in healthcare. I don't think it's there yet. I think they got some very good people who are trying to figure it out.
They've made a lot of inroads. That's something we talked about on the show. And I mean, my partner, she's a nurse, and she would talk. I mean, we're not in a great place, but we're better than where we were 5 years ago. A heck of a lot better, right? And we still got a ways to go.
That's right. So there are some of those things. I mean, where you can argue kind of the transformational piece is kind of on the natural resource side. Do you want to have fracking? Do you want to have uranium mining? Do you want these? But those are you can't debate the kind of underlying reason for that, which is that you want to kind of transform your economy. You can argue about whether that's what you want or not, but you can't argue about the intent.
True,
right?
That's true.
So when I look at them, I that's what I see. I see kind of what they're intending to do, and so that's taking advantage of the natural resources that we have, and trying to make the most of the money we have to kind of change the way that we approach things like healthcare. Yeah, and we did a lot of that. I mean, we had the first collaborative emergency centers. I mean, we changed the way that emergency medicine was being managed in rural communities across the province. And we set a model in place that when we started it, it got picked up by PEI and then by Saskatchewan, and other people started to say, okay, so we can use these kind of smaller rural emergency rooms, and we can put kind of, nurse practitioners and emergency medicine specialists in these places and provide 98% of the service.
It makes a lot of sense to do that.
And then allow the doctors who would normally be in the emergency rooms overnight to actually be in their offices during the day.
Right.
And what we found was that the number of visits to the emergency room actually went down because more people could get in to see their doctor in their primary care setting.
Right.
So we did a lot of thinking about that, and I get the sense that this government does that and is doing that. The thing about transformational governments is they tend to upset people because they're about change.
Yeah.
And if you are creating change, then somebody's going to be upset about that. It's axiomatic, right? Change. Somebody will see themselves as a loser in the equation, right?
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So transactional governments actually tend to be longer lived. Because they're managing what's in the windshield, and this is not a criticism at all. Because
it's a good way to think about it.
Steve McNeil was very good to me when he was in government. He was, nice enough to actually put my picture in the House of Assembly as the first New Democrat premier. There's a kind of a longer story about why that happened, but very, very. I said at the time that it was a very gracious thing to do, and I think that's true.
So how much do you blame?
But I found his approach to be far more transactional than transformational. So that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
how much do you blame your government losing to him shaving his beard?
I hope you're enjoying a pint with us. We'll be right back. Your dream home does not have to be just a dream. Today's show is brought to you by Camilla Najat of Exit Realty Metro. Camilla is the realtor who knows how to get things done. Buying or selling? Go to afternoonpint.ca and we will help with a personal introduction. That's afternoonpint.ca/Camilla to make your dreams become a reality.
It was really funny because, of course, during the run-up to that, he just said, "I'm never going to do that." And then it was one of the first things he did. And,
wow!
And it was
gloves were off.
No. I mean, Stephen had a particular kind of approach, and there was lots of stuff in his government as he was managing it. And that's a perfectly valid approach to government. To kind of manage situations as they arrive, try to kind of, round off the edges of kind of the inequalities, and you can do it slowly and kind of below the radar. That's an approach. It's just not one that I chose.
Yeah. I mean, later, I thought he managed COVID as well as you could for provincial premier at this time. I mean, maybe not agree with everything, but there was a lot there that, Nova Scotia seemed to. We fared better than most, right? As a province. And
the funny thing about it is because we were watching all this, the McKechnie Institute with Kevin Quigley, and then three of our junior fellows wrote a book called Seized by Uncertainty, which looked at the response to COVID across the country and in different sectors. So what happened in tourism, what happened in senior citizens, looked at them, kind of in different places. Yeah. Wrote this book. It was nominated for the Donner Prize. Oh. And then last year, I had the great pleasure to go with Kevin and our other fellows to Toronto for the Donner Prize Awards, where they won.
Oh. Wow.
And so I was kind of involved in that from a different perspective because I had helped out with that book by convening a lot of the panels when we were talking to experts to get their input and what I found interesting, and is kind of a little known thing, is that more people died from COVID in Nova Scotia after all of the restrictions were lifted than during the actual
period of pandemic.
The pandemic period itself. Because it was kind of a long tail effect. All those people who were going to be very susceptible but were never exposed because we had very much prevented that. They unfortunately died after the fact because they were compromised in a way that even the vaccine
wouldn't have helped them.
Was not going to help them.
Wow.
But a fascinating time.
Interesting, yeah.
And of course, Bob Strang and the Premier, they were the face of that. Yeah. They were the messengers. They were the communicators, and they were doing that every day.
It's crazy we lived through it.
And if you want to see a great reflection sometime, go and just pick any day, and just download the press conferences from all the premiers across the country and watch how they all presented. Because there were very, very different ways. So, sitting at the table and having the chief medical officer of health with you at the table was the style. Mm-hmm. But if you looked at Doug Ford, for example, he just had a unimic and he was standing out front, so there was no barrier between him and the audience.
Oh yeah,
right. There was that. So there were a number of different communications approaches.
Yeah,
by the various
cues,
visually that nobody would notice at the time, but it's dramatic when you think about it 100%. And go back and have a look at it.
I will say, so my wife's from Quebec, right? So we did obviously watch Legault's press conferences and things as well, and those were very different, and even the messaging was very different during that time, I noticed. And Quebec was one of the worst performing provinces during that period. For cases and things.
And I don't know this, Matt, and maybe our listeners don't, but how was Quebec compared to Nova Scotia? Were they more lenient or were they more strict, or what would you say, kind of generally?
They went all over the place because they had to bring in restrictions at curfews.
Okay.
They had to go more strict, but I think the way that Legault did things had more people resist, and so there was a lot.
So it was almost too aggressive, which created the backlash.
Yeah, maybe that was it a little bit. It was an interesting way to go about it because we didn't have curfews. We just had limits on how you could gather, which to me made sense because it was not all the rules made sense. You could go see a Mooseheads game, but you couldn't have a 10. You couldn't have 11 people in your house. That part didn't fully make sense, but I understand, limiting the gatherings and the changing of houses and things like that because you spread stuff that way.
I mean, it took a while for them even to get to the point where they said, well, you can play golf.
Right.
Which when you think about it,
that's foolish.
It's crazy.
Looking back at it now, some of it was foolish, right?
Yeah. But there was such a huge level of paranoia right off the bat. You remember everybody, wiping down their zucchinis when they brought them home from the grocery store. It was just, it was a crazy moment.
It changed our way of thinking forever, I think. The humans. Yeah.
But I'm just trying to think of his name, the governor of New York, who was kind of discredited after the case, but he did this enormous job of kind of explaining what they were doing in New York. But at the same time, you had these shots of these refrigerator trucks just full of body bags that were being loaded into the back of this gigantic burial pit where they were just kind of, and it was so gruesome to watch that no wonder people had the living daylight scared of them.
Well, and I mean, it's you were a premier, so you would understand what the weight of the shoulders of an entire province would be on you. And I think people who don't really understand that, the people who are just who cares? Why have any restrictions, whatever. But I can probably guess that the last thing a premier would want would be the one that had a bunch of people die. So when you go into this, you make these rules, you try to figure it out, and you try to limit the death toll, basically.
Of course. Yeah. It's and this is kind of a forgotten piece of my history, but the day that I was sworn in as premier was the day that the World Health Organization declared that H1N1 was a pandemic.
Right.
So we had a pandemic.
We did.
At that time, and it was a very interesting way that rolled out because there was only one manufacturer of the vaccine at that time in Canada that was in Quebec, and there was this question about whether or not Quebec would actually allow the vaccine to be released outside of Quebec until they had everything that they wanted.
Okay.
Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So kind of one of my first Council of Federation meetings, I mean, that was, I think that was more rumor than anything that Premier Charest would have considered or thought of or done. But it was that there was this thought that this might happen. And of course, in the end, the vaccine that was available was distributed by population across the country as it ought to have been.
Yeah.
But there was a problem because batches of the vaccine had been spoiled, so there was not enough vaccine to go around.
Wow.
And it was a different, you might remember this, it had a different target, that particular virus, if I can put it this way, had a different targeting subset. So it affected young people, so children, pregnant women, and people in indigenous populations were the ones who were considered most vulnerable.
My gosh.
And it was the death of the young boy in Ontario that kind of really set everything off. Like that was when all of a sudden everything became panicked. But and people have forgotten this now, but if you were at the Dartmouth Sportsplex, there were lineups going into Dartmouth Sportsplex for vaccinations.
Yeah.
Right? Like we were, and when we first prioritized and said these are the people who will get the vaccine first, we got some pretty nasty calls.
Oh yeah,
in the Premier's office. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Interesting.
It didn't necessarily restore your faith in humanity. I mean, they. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's
No,
crazy.
it was not. Some of that was not very pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can. It seems like vaccines they're a bit of a hot topic even right today.
It's where we're going backwards on some of that stuff. I mean, it's unfortunate, I think. And
it is.
Pretty, I mean, of course, you don't really know what you're getting all the time until you take it and you hope for the best. But you got to trust the medical professionals out there that have your best interest in heart, I think.
Well,
I think so.
Look, there's a lot of people who wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for vaccines, and not just these ones, but of course all the childhood vaccines that we took.
Oh my gosh,
and so it's funny because of course when I was in school, they didn't worry much about authorizations from parents. They just lined all the kids up.
Oh gosh, yeah, exactly.
You got your vaccine shot.
This is what you had to do.
Yeah, I mean, there was a public health nurse in the school, right? The and of course, I after that, I was in the Navy for a couple of years. So when you were in the armed forces, they didn't ask you much either. You just
you were ordered.
You were just kind of lined up, and if you were going somewhere, then and you needed vaccine shots, you got them.
I actually wanted to go back a bit too.
Let's go back. Actually,
we were curious. Like, we looked at your career before you became a politician and as a lawyer and as a journalist, right? Also in the Navy. Right? That's quite the trifecta.
Yeah. I couldn't hold a job.
Yeah. So like being I mean, I could only imagine that being a journalist and uncovering the world would make you would prime you for politics. I think that makes sense. But how do you think all those three occupations really shaped you for getting into politics?
Well, I don't know about how they shaped me getting into politics. I mean, people. I can only speak for myself. I don't know what motivates other people to get in, but I always had an interest in kind of public policy, kind of what was going on. At a very early age, when I was in high school, I was the kid who read the newspaper every day. I had a subscription to Newsweek. I had a subscription to Time. I read those things even as a kid, which is, I guess you could describe it as precocious, but because normally that stuff that happens kind of later on.
Right.
But I always had this tremendous interest in kind of what was going on in the world. So that's kind of really what shaped my kind of desire to want to be part of that. Mm-hmm. But I think all of those other things, all of those other experiences, including the fact that I grew up in Milton, growing up in a very rural community in a working class family.
What'd your dad do?
My dad was a sheet metal worker.
Oh, yeah?
And he worked at the shipyards.
Okay, cool.
And in fact, he worked exactly in that shipyards where I made that announcement when we won. And I had a copy, and still have a copy, of his paycheck.
Oh, cool.
From the Halifax shipyards, which I had meant to bring with me that day when we announced the shipbuilding contract. And I really wish I would have, because, in my view, having those kinds of jobs which allow people to support their families is extraordinarily important.
Yeah, full circle moment. Yeah.
I was going to say full circle moment.
Certainly for me. And kind of growing up in a working class family where there was no money, like there was no, and it wasn't, my parents were not mean with money. Mm-hmm. They just didn't have any.
Right.
And so they gave us what they could from what they had. Yeah. Right. So when I wanted a bicycle, I got a paper route. Yep. And I saved the money and I bought a bicycle, because that was how that was going to happen, if it was going to happen. And I think, and then when I was living in Milton, because we had moved back and forth between, it's a complicated story, but we moved back and forth. As I said, my father was a sheet metal worker, worked in the shipyards. So we would often come in at the school year in Halifax, in the summer in Milton. And my grandfather died when I was in grade 8. So we moved back to Milton to look after my grandmother. And I went to high school in Liverpool. Cool. Which is a bit convoluted. But when I was in high school, what do you do in rural Nova Scotia? I had traps. I went hunting, and I remember I was at some kind of an event, and the Trappers Association wanted to talk to me, and so they come over to talk to me, and my staff are with me, and I start talking about different kinds of traps with them, box traps and light haul traps, and they're saying, like, how the hell do you know?
Didn't see that coming from the.
We did trapping when I was a kid. Like, that's one of the things we did in a rural community. So all of those experiences, and especially the hard ones, kind of are things you carry with me. I've told this story before about.
It makes you a chameleon too, in a sense, where you can relate to more people by being in these different roles, this Navy role and the journalism role, and you can really kind of see where people are coming from with these perspectives. I hope you're enjoying a pint with us. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, it's Chip here from Don't Overthink It Chip. Big shout out to the Afternoon Pint Media team for managing my content creator career. If your business needs support, big or small, hit up Afternoon Pint and learn more about our reputation for boosting foot traffic with curated storytelling for your business.
When I was a kid, so my family, my mother and father had 2 kids before the Second World War. Before the Second World War. I have a sister, or had a sister, she's passed away now, who had a daughter who was older than I am.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? So my father came home in 45, and like a lot of people who stayed on right to the very end. And then I wasn't born until 57, and then my sister and my brother after that. So my parents had kids around the house for 50 years.
Wow.
And think about that.
I mean, in today's economy, so will parents today.
That's right.
That may be true. Yeah. So they invested, their lives in looking after their kids and ensuring that we had clothes on our back, a roof over our head, and food on the table. Like that was the lives that they lived, which I have been, forever grateful for. But there was a period when my father was working at the shipyards when he went on strike. And when you're a kid and you're laying in bed at night and you can hear your parents kind of out in the living room and they're talking in very quiet tones because they don't want the kids to hear, and it's all about, where we're going to get the money for, food next week. It's one of those things that absolutely shapes, kind of who you are.
Yeah.
And certainly that was certainly the impact on me.
Yeah.
So
is that what made you go for the NDP? Because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're viewed as a very centrist NDPer.
Yeah, and I always think that's funny too, because if you look at Gary Dewar or those folks in Manitoba or I mean Tommy Douglas and he was very much transformational at the time in Saskatchewan, because none of these things existed. Like Medicare didn't exist. A lot of the social programs, the kind of human rights legislation just didn't exist. So he was farsighted enough to kind of bring all of those things in. But to a large measure, it has been, the NDP and people, what we now call progressives. That's a. I always wonder about that word, but anyway, that's the group of people who have always been charged with the responsibility of protecting that, and not allowing us to go, backwards to the day where you can have as much health care as you can afford.
Right.
Because that's where that ends.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so. I used to joke about it myself. I mean, mainly because I knew it would drive the Tories crazy, because they would say, they were progressive conservatives, and I would say, people used to like progressive conservatives, but now they want conservative progressives. And it was kind of just a little,
a bit of fun.
A bit of fun.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at our record, so I'll give you an example. We raised the HST by 2%. It was controversial. Despite the fact that we had hearings around the province, we invited every people in. We said, "Here's the financial state of the province. We can either cut things or we can raise taxes, but you can't really allow the province to run itself deeply into debt. So how are we going to manage this?" So we agreed to raise the HST by 2%, which, by the way, was actually backfilling a 2% decrease that Harper had taken. So people weren't actually paying more taxes; they just weren't getting the 2% break. Right. So we were filling that tax space that had been vacated by the federal government.
Kind of what happened this week with gas.
Yeah, exactly. What we did with that money is we used half of it to deal with the kind of deficit of the province, and we used the other half to do the poverty reduction tax credit, the disability tax credit, the graduate retention tax credit. I mean, it was actually, to that extent, it was an income redistribution measure.
Right.
We didn't talk about it in those terms because people always freak out when you talk about redistributing income.
Yes.
But it was a redistribution policy.
Interesting.
And that essentially took the very poorest people in the province and put more money in their pocket. And I'll give you another example. We had seniors in this province who received the GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, which is what you're supposed to receive when you're so poor that your CPP and your old age security does not get you above the poverty line. They were receiving the GIS and still paying income tax.
Oh, wow.
Still paying income tax. So we brought in a program that said, if you receive the GIS, we will rebate the federal tax that you pay.
Okay.
So at least you're getting what you're supposed to get.
Right.
And it was so interesting, as these things always are, because I would get calls from seniors who would say, well, my next door neighbor received a check for $50 or $75, and I didn't receive one, and I don't know why, and it would be because they didn't pay tax. They weren't in that group,
right? Mm-hmm.
So they were upset about it, because their neighbor was.
Gotcha.
So finally, we said, look, it's way too hard to describe how this is going to work. So people who receive the GIS, regardless of whether they pay income tax on it or not, we'll rebate them $50, even if they don't pay anything, just so everybody,
everyone just quiets down.
Well, no, just so that they, that they don't feel like we're somehow picking favorites of, people in seniors' residences and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So it was just a little, and you learn, whenever you bring out a program, you sometimes have to be a little bit flexible about how that is being implemented.
I think even today, the complexity of programs baffle people a lot.
Sure,
People do not understand what's going in and what's going out and why. And sometimes, too, I saw something interesting the other day, like right now, and I mean, this is just speaking off the cuff, but about this rebate for groceries. And I mean, as nice as it sounds, I would love to see the grocery price go down and not have the rebate. Because I mean, I don't see the real the strategy going forward for stuff like this. I mean, it's a Band-Aid for sure. Yeah. But like, what are we going to do to get ourselves out of these messes? Like, long term or within a year, right?
So you bring up, I think what you're kind of underlining is something that I've been doing a lot of thinking about today and over the last actually kind of 10 years since I've been out of government, which is that, after the Second World War, the great sponge of discontent and despair was the middle class.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was that if you were part of the middle class or trying to get into the middle class, you had hope, because you had hope that you could have a home, that you could have a house, that you could support your family,
right,
and that your kids would be better off than you.
Yes.
And that was the enormous value.
And it happened for a while.
It did happen.
Yeah.
It did happen.
Yeah.
And that was the enormous value of the middle class, that it was aspirational in nature, that it was about kind of building a life, having hope.
And equity. And, it was part of that
lots of words that you could use to describe how that operated.
Yeah.
What has been happening now for quite a while is that we are collapsing that sponge of discontent.
Yeah.
And just to use my sponge analogy, what you are wringing out of it is despair and discontent.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so people have lost that sense of hope. They have lost the sense of the notion. You see this enormous income inequality where CEOs are making 500 times what a worker on the line is making.
Right.
And it just.
And the home costs are astronomical to those.
And
it's
confounding to people.
Yeah.
And of course, and I talked, my son's 35, but I talk to, people, from 25 to 35, and they really do feel like there isn't an opportunity for them to kind of have the same kind of life that their parents had.
Right.
Even from the fact of going downtown, having a few beers on a Friday night, and getting a burger.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a night that, wasn't that long ago that I did that, and it was it could be a $20 or $40 night, and I could afford to do that with my paycheck that I got as I did other things and had an apartment and all that. But today, gosh, you go out,
can't do it.
Take your family for a burger, you're in $100 probably.
Oh,
right?
at one point, $100 was like a fancy meal, and now that can be like literally lunch.
Like McDonald's
with family, even a family of three. Like I have a family of three, and it was my wife and I went out to a restaurant not that long ago, just this week, and it was my 4-year-old, so he doesn't eat a whole bunch. He's just kid stuff, right? And us, and it was almost $100,
right?
And it's like that used to be a good meal. Now it's not, right? But one thing I'll say though, and I think anyone listening, and if this shatters, the glass in your brain there, but I don't think there's anything governments can do to bring down food costs.
No.
I think there is nothing. And when people go online and they say, "Oh, what are you doing to help bring food costs down?" I think there's nothing a government can do.
Could they not, or could? And I'm asking you this just because you said it.
I'll correct myself. Not nothing. Governments need to take over all of the food industry and say food is a right and no more competition, and we will be a net zero. We will not profit off it at all. That's the only way they can do it. I think that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm not. That's kind of an ungenerous view of the world.
Well, I just like in what case though? Like when I look at things in the world, what has gone down in price ever in history?
Yeah. So okay, that's not true.
Well,
like you can buy a car today that, in relative terms, is cheaper than you could have bought it 20 years ago. You can buy a TV today at the checkout in the grocery store.
Yes, that's true.
Right? Like there are lots of examples of things that in fact have gone down in price, and I'm not using that as a kind of stalking horse for groceries, because your observation is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
But Manitoba just recently brought in, and it was actually NDP Nova Scotia who kind of brought the legislation in the last session of the House before the Manitoba government brought it in, and I'm not sure if there was some coordination to that or not. I doubt it, but which is that whole question of how you go about controlling that kind of algorithmic pricing when it comes to food.
Right.
So 10 people go online and look at the same food product, and instead of saying, oh well, they're going to sell more of it, and therefore the old kind of idea of demand and supply, right? You buy more, it becomes cheaper to make because you're making more, and therefore you can charge less.
Right.
Now, if they realize there's higher demand, they can charge higher prices because they know that you'll pay it. So controlling that kind of stuff.
And what was the new thing I saw about like behavior of to where you live and how how close a grocery store is? You don't have the ability to go and shop. I mean, this is crazy, right? This is crazy that people that wouldn't have the ability to maybe go to a Costco or to go somewhere else to get something.
There is a competition thing, that's for sure. There is a competition thing that actually comes into play.
Yeah.
But even still, it's like, I think when people sit there and think like, beer's not going to cost $1 again, right? It's never going to get to that point. And the thing is that what we've seen is like wages don't keep up.
Yeah, that's right.
And therefore, like things get out of proportion. Like cars, I would argue, have gone down proportion-wise. Obviously, dollar-wise, they've gone up, but proportion-wise. But that's just because they make an insane amount of cars, and there's more than enough to be kicking around. Like if we had houses like we had cars, houses would be fine. Like we would not be charging so much for houses, right? Because there'd be a bunch of them sitting empty. But look how many empty used car lots. And
you look at the price of gas today. I mean, just talk about cost of living and the price of gas. And what I think, this is a really offhand remark, but I watch all of this stuff that's going on in the world, escalating price of gas and the way it affects everything else in life, like the cost of food and all of the delivery costs. Everything is being affected by the price of gas. And the answer that you hear most often is we got to drill more, and we got to have more fossil fuels. We got to have more oil and gas, and you think, well, just wait a second, like. Surely there's other technology. Oh yes, just wait a second. There is. We could have an electric vehicle fleet for trucks. We could do that.
Right.
I mean,
and there's other avenues than just natural resource mining for wealth too, for wealth and culture and life. I mean, I'm not saying I'm against it or pro it. The thing is like I won't pretend to know what fracking is going to do to an area because I really honestly don't. And when I try to research, the math is muddy. The research is all over the place. It's like maybe if my well was perfect and drilled and in good condition, but a collapsed well or an older well might have problems. And then, as the more you look into it, the more complex.
We had Don Mills on, and after Don Mills, I went and tried to do as much research on fracking as possible. Like I had ChatGPT going, I had Google going, and basically
he's a brilliant guy, Don Mills.
He is, but even ChatGPT basically came back. It was basically inconclusive.
Yeah,
it can be great. It can also be devastating.
So we brought in the moratorium on fracking.
Yeah,
and we also brought in the ban on drilling on Georges Bank. Right?
Okay,
and then we brought in a moratorium and not a ban at the time because we said, well, there might be technology out there someday that might allow you to kind of safely extract natural gas. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's fracking but instead of just kind of banning it altogether, we'll put this moratorium on, and we'll let future governments, as time goes by, reevaluate and determine, because there were all of the earthquakes that were taking place with that seemed to be linked to fracking and all that stuff. So we didn't want to be. I mean, there's lots of people in the environmental movement who would just say, no, just go right to the ban.
Right.
And maybe this is where I get that middle of the road kind of reputation. But I was just trying to be thoughtful about it. I think that generally people have two opinions. Mm-hmm. They have their immediate reaction, which is you ask somebody a question, they get their immediate reaction. And then when you give people all of the information, they have a considered opinion.
Yes.
So you have your initial opinion and your considered opinion.
Sure.
I like to try and think that I lean toward the considered opinion, which is we knew that we didn't want ever that it would be drilling on the Georges Bank. So I had no problem with that ban. Mm-hmm. I had no problem with the uranium ban, which was the first piece of legislation we brought in, by the way. You know, because uranium dust doesn't stay in one place.
It has quite a radius.
It has quite a radius.
You're in a windy province.
And can get into water supplies. And it's and to me, it was just danger that we didn't need, right? So on the fracking thing, like I said, it just seemed to me that there might at some point in time be some technology that would be, possible. Yeah. So we moved to a moratorium rather than a ban. And to a lot of people, that wording didn't make any difference. But,
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's it's an interesting thing trying to balance the prosperity and everything. I mean, it's to me, I think there is a lot of renewable ideas and like renewable resources that we could go. I mean, I like the thought process of Houston with the wind energy. I think that has some prospects of being something that could be, if they can get.
It's down the road, though.
But that's the thing; it's way far down the road.
It's down the road, and I think all of those efforts, I think, are absolutely laudable. Like we ought to be looking at ways to bring more. As you know, we had the first real expansion of renewables in Nova Scotia. So when we came into power, there was about 6% of the power on the grid was renewable, and that was basically the 6 power dams on the Mersey River.
Right.
That was basically, we had that in the Pubnico wind farm.
Yeah.
But other than that, there wasn't really anything by way of renewables in the province. So we managed to move the utility from 6% to 24% in 4 years, which, when you think about a utility, that's a big change.
And then when you talk about the short term, I think the power, the electricity itself jumped at that time, right? When you guys were implementing these strategies, it was like the consumer probably didn't see that immediately.
So what was happening was that the fossil fuel prices were going up and up and up. So we were hostage to fossil fuel prices. The difference was there was a 3% calculated increase by bringing in the wind farms.
Right.
So your overall power bills go up by 3%.
Okay.
But that was a cap on that amount. Once it went up 3%, then it wasn't going to continue to go up any further because it's you pay the capital for the wind resource, and then you're not paying for fuel costs, right? Whereas when you have a coal-fired generating station, or you're using bunker C oil or natural gas, you're hostage to whatever the market price is for those fossil fuels.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Once you make the investment in a wind resource, it is whatever it is, and then you're only paying like maintenance costs and those things kind of after the fact.
Right.
So yes, it was an increase, but the long term it was going to be better. Yeah. And then of course we made the deal with Newfoundland to do Muskrat Falls, and I don't think people even look at it. I'll say this, and then people say, "Oh, well, you got to be kidding." I mean, this was outrageously successful for Nova Scotia. Like, I mean, the original deal was that we would do 20% of the project costs, and we would get 20% of the power.
Right.
Our 20% of the project cost was the Maritime Link. Yeah. Right. So we were building the cable.
Right.
And in calculating it, the question was, well, how far onshore does that cable actually have to go in order to be 20% of the value of the project? And Newfoundland projected the value of the project. Right. Right. Eventually we decided what that was. Nova Scotia Power, through the Maritime Link Corporation, I think it's called, built the Maritime Link. They did it on time. They did it on budget. Then the project costs went through the roof. Yeah. Billions and billions of dollars more. So in the end, I think Nova Scotia ended up paying something like 10 or 12% of the project cost.
Of the total project cost after inflated. Wow.
For 20% of the energy.
Yeah.
So of course Newfoundland looks at that project now and says, "Oh yeah, this is great for Nova Scotia, not so good for Newfoundland." Right? And if you look at people like Seamus O'Regan and other kind of Newfoundland politicians who came in kind of after the fact, they managed to convince the federal government to put rate stabilization money in place in order to underwrite the cost of the project, and that was all necessary in Newfoundland. That didn't affect the Nova Scotia part of the project, and kind of ironically, because of the delays, there were actually points in which Nova Scotia was selling power into Newfoundland.
Oh, okay.
Because before the project got finished, there was actually an energy deficit in Newfoundland where they had to get energy from somewhere. So we were actually shipping it the other way.
Oh, wow.
And now, of course, I think they've made up like all of that, but it is a fixed price of power. And the thing about the Muskrat Falls is, depending on how it goes about, what its generating capacity is, you would be able to backfill additional resources from hydropower at spot prices. So, in theory, you should be able to get even a better price for that power.
In your opinion, when it comes to the power, how come we really haven't really used our tidal force here, which are the highest and strongest in the world?
Yeah. More water flows in and out of the Bay of Fundy on the tides than the flow of all the water in all the rivers in the world.
Yeah,
amazing.
That's
crazy.
just to think about. How much water goes in and out.
Oh,
right?
Nova Scotia could be lighting up the entire world.
Yeah. Unfortunately, part of that problem is just the power of that tide.
Yeah.
To have something that actually withstands. I mean, that's what happened to the first turbine they put down. They put the turbine down. The tide came in, blew all the blades off the turbine. And all the engineers, everybody went, "Oh wow, it's a colossal failure." All the engineers went, "Wow, that means there's even more here than we thought." Right.
Right.
So I think that will come at some point in time, but it's another one of those technology questions.
Yeah.
And I'm really kind of talking out of my hat here because I don't know where that's actually at now. I haven't followed it, but yeah, like a lot of people, I looked at that and thought, yes, this is another place where we are kind of blessed with a natural resource if we can find a way.
Seems like we're stuck on the oil and like technology is just on the cusp, and we're kind of
where are we getting now? Like when Muskrat Falls came on, it took us to 40% renewables, and they're supposed to be at 60, I think, soon.
Okay.
And the ISO, the Independent System Operator, and at least the Utility and Review Board before the ISO said there was actually more room on the grid for more renewables. So it's always a mix. Because of course you need to have backup.
I absolutely, I agree with that. Yeah.
So, and I used to say to people, you have to look at it as an energy portfolio. Like it's a number of different pieces that need to kind of all fit together to work right.
Makes sense.
Should the province ever get back into being the owner of a power company?
I don't know why you'd. I mean, I know there's lots of people in my party and who would disagree with this. I honestly don't know why you would want to. We toyed around with the idea that some of these wind farms would be like community wind farms. So they'd be owned by municipalities, or they would be owned by co-ops or other ways, so that they would be connecting to the grid but wouldn't be owned by the power company.
Yeah.
And the problem was that we came in 2009 after the great financial collapse. And there was no money to finance those projects. But guess who could?
Yeah.
Nova Scotia Power.
yeah, exactly.
So, and people, and I know, in 2013, the Liberals were running ads about me and Nova Scotia Power, and it was part of their attack on me was this whole, kind of what they considered me as kind of very close to Nova Scotia Power. And of course, that's ridiculous, but not hard to believe when you're the premier, because there are regulatory measures. You're involved in the regulation of the utility.
Right.
But what I recognized with Nova Scotia Power was, well, first of all, there are very, very few head offices of any corporation in Nova Scotia. you can, yes, Sobeys has their office in Stellarton.
Yep.
I would argue most of their decisions actually get made in Mississauga.
Yeah, right.
But Nova Scotia Power is actually here, and is Emera, right? And they're a big utility. If you were to look at the pension funds of most Nova Scotians, they probably have Nova Scotia Power and Emera in their pension funds.
Oh yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
So they add more value than is necessarily apparent to people, and I think you needed a good regulatory regime that forced them to do the things that they ought to do, and that you can do that without having to own them. Now, if I went back in time, way back, when the Conservatives actually privatized it, probably wouldn't have made that decision. But it's been made, and we're now 40 years down the road.
Right.
And how many billions of dollars do you want to pay to reacquire that utility when you could be using that money for other things?
No, that's a fair thought. I have this utopian dream where, if Nova Scotia or any province, not just us, but any province if we could say, it's 10 years down the road or whatever, 10 years down the road, and Tim Houston's wind farm is created and it's producing what he thinks we'll be able to produce, with, basically being able to power all of Nova Scotia and still sell off literally another 300% of it. To me, if I was the supreme leader of Nova Scotia, I would be looking at a spot where I would say, I'm selling this power off to the United States or whoever other provinces want to buy it, and there will be no bill for people in Nova Scotia for power.
If Tim Houston wanted to do that, he could do that.
Yeah.
He could. I mean, you could decide that you're going to build wind farms and that you're going to underwrite the cost of those by the provincial government, and then you're going to determine the cost to the consumer, based on whatever the invested cost by the province was in that particular wind. You could do that and say, we're not going to get a profit. We're not going to take the 9% a year that Nova Scotia Power gets on this. You could do it. You can do it.
Yeah.
The question is, what other infrastructure do you have to build to surround that?
Right. Okay.
What does your accounting look like? What does your maintenance program look like? I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
What does your power distribution network look like? If you're going to do that, you could. I just didn't. It didn't make sense to me, at least at that point, to do that. If you compare the utility to what other utilities make, they actually make less as a regulated utility in Nova Scotia than a lot of other utilities in the world.
Really? Oh, wow.
And it's why their credit rating has been degraded, right? Yeah. And it's one of those things. There are things that I very much want to see in public ownership. I think that particular ship has sailed on the utility.
That's fair.
But future governments could make a different decision.
Yeah. No, I just it's just thoughts that you have lying in bed at night, right?
No, and it's funny. It's a funny one because you think, well, if we just own this.
Thanks so much.
I'll tell you what happened when Nova Scotia Power was owned by the province. Because it became a political football, of course. Right.
Yeah.
So what would happen in the days of Buchanan is the president of Nova Scotia Power would say, Mr. Premier, we're going to have to put up power rights by 10% this year.
Right.
And the Premier would say, oh, you can't do that. I'm going to have an election at the end of this year.
Yeah.
So they would take money out of the provincial coffers, which they would send over to Nova Scotia Power to underwrite the power costs to keep the price down. We could do the same thing today.
Right.
I mean, we could underwrite the power costs with taxes.
Yeah, but that's not even what I meant. I was kind of meant like let's sell our power. almost like what Saudi Arabia does. Like Saudi Arabia, like
if you have excess power to sell.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah,
absolutely.
They get to a point where we have excess power, sell it off.
Absolutely.
It sounds a little Trumpian. It's like we're going to have power, going to make other people pay for it.
No. If you can do that, it's fine. The history of power in Nova Scotia is one of the most consequential political issues for government after government after government, going back for 60 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's is it going to be resolved in the next little while? I doubt it.
Yeah, fair.
My advice to whether they're my colleagues or aspiring opposition leaders is to not make promises about what you're going to do with respect to things like power that you're then going to find out that you're not going to be able to do.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a fair answer, a fair thing to say, because we really, it's like you said, the transfer of that power, whether it's wind energy, they still don't know how they're doing it yet. It's far away, and it's like it's
you got to start now.
Yeah,
right? You got to start now.
True, but
you never start, you never
have
get
to
there.
do more with what you have, right?
Yeah.
And maybe lean into your arts community a bit, man. Start Hollywood.
There you go.
Well,
but anyways,
really, the future of Nova Scotia is in doing the tough things.
What's that?
Yeah.
Yes,
It's in doing the tough things, and we need, whether it's in defense or in other kind of innovative research. I mean, we need to. I believe this more now than ever that we have these enormous resources in our universities that we really have to take advantage of. And Dalhousie is an immensely, just this enormous
leading
kind of collection
so many things that we don't even talk about. Battery technology, so many other countless.
Sure. There's a little firm here that does cube satellites.
Oh yeah.
That started in a lab at Dow. They're in Halifax, and I mean, when I think of satellites, I think of something the size of a Volkswagen.
Yeah.
But now, now, of course, they're literally these. They weigh them in grams, right?
Wow.
So they, and even when you think when I first thought about the kind of satellite launch facility in Canso, I vision, Cape Canaveral.
Contact,
yeah. And of course, they're putting up rockets that are the size of those cruise missiles. Like they're
true. Yeah,
they're just, it's a different technology has provided a different scale. But I think in the university environment, we have tremendous resource there that we really need to take advantage of. And I'm fortunate right now to be on the board of governors of University of King's College, which is my alma mater, and King's is a wonderful institution that focuses a lot on the humanities. Of course, we have the journalism program and the fine arts program, and all of the other stuff that we do. But the humanities are important for this reason. I'll pitch this here, so maybe other people will hear it. I'll pitch this here. All of the things that we do at universities, many of them have a vocational aspect to them. So if you're taking accounting, or if you're taking, you're being taught things that you're going to use when you go into the workforce. When you learn the humanities, when you take the humanities, you're learning the things that you're going to need to know for leadership. And that's the difference. You learn about philosophy. You learn about ethics. You learn about the kind of the critical thinking that comes from the great thinkers of history. So the humanities should not be undersold, and we should be encouraging people that yes, it's really important to prepare yourself into the workforce. But at some point in time, you're going to want to be in a leadership position, and you need these other skills too.
Yeah.
That will be provided through the humanities.
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
That is good. Yeah,
that's a better ender than I could have asked before we got into our stupid questions here. But perfect segue. So did you want to do anything before we do our 10 questions, Matt? Like we usually do 10 questions at the end of our show. They're random and they're silly, a bit of fun. Or did you have anything first? You ready to go?
You know what? I had something, but I'll let it go because that was a good move into this.
It was a perfect closer.
Yeah, it was a good perfect closer.
So let's get into our silly 10 questions round. I'll kick them off, Matt.
Yeah,
and
go for it.
okay. question number 1. These are just, you answer these, you talk philosophical, so now you're going to get to use a little bit of philosophy on this one. So, in the near future, do you think politics could be better done with AI, artificial intelligence, to replace human politicians?
Well, yes, really good question, because people think of AI as artificial intelligence. I think of it as alien intelligence. We do not know kind of where that is going, and I am deeply concerned about it. If you think that politicians can be replaced by alien intelligence, the answer might be yes, but you have to ask yourself, would you really want that to happen?
What was it? There was a country in the Middle East.
Good answer.
A country in the Middle East that has their first minister that is an AI minister.
100%. Yeah. I read the same article. Right.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It is scary. They're locking some AIs behind doors right now because of how powerful they are. So
keep in mind though that particular minister was not like, I think in a lot of cases when you're making decisions, you have to make decisions with heart. This was the way they did this was like it was like a scheduling type of minister. Yeah. So it was like, okay, sure, all right, but
Well, if you haven't read it, Yuval Harari's book Nexus. This is
it's become recommended before in this show, and that might be the second or third time we've heard that book.
Yeah, so we're gonna have to
read it because it'll scare the living daylights right out of you.
All right. Question number two. So if politics had like walkout music, like in wrestling, what would your entrance song be?
Oh, I actually had to do this at one point in time. I used Born to Run. I don't know. I mean, it was an off the top of my head kind of thing.
Probably were you in a wrestling ring? Is that what happened?
Probably should have used something with like the Dropkick Murphys or something.
Oh, there you go. Great song. Yeah, great group.
The Ledge is kind of like a wrestling ring.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Okay, so you just recommended people read Nexus, but what's another book, movie, or show you think people should go back to, and maybe if it's just, again, like, just to kind of reflect on the world of where it's going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I read a lot. I just read Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann,
haven't heard of that.
Which is kind of written, I think, in the 1920s or 30s. Oh. It is a deeply kind of philosophical book, and it addresses kind of many questions of kind of ethics, and it was very controversial for its time, as you can quite imagine, because it had all kinds of overtones, what we would consider to be kind of progressive overtones today.
Right.
But it's a big read. Like, it's one of those ones that it will take you. It took me a month because it's so dense.
Yeah.
And it's so dense with very thought-provoking pieces that it takes you a while. I mean, I would find that I'd be reading it and it would exhaust me.
Okay.
So
that's kind of fun, though, right?
Yeah,
I mean, everyone looks to get their kind of their mind rocked a little bit when they read. I just read A Man's Search for Meaning for the first time.
Yes.
And I mean, that's an old book, but and I fell into it by accident. And
so this is the one that was written in the concentration camp.
100% Holocaust survivor.
Yes, and I remember that.
Man.
And I remember
that book sat with me for days after I read it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was so cool. Yeah. I mean, not cool, but like...
It talks about how people would give themselves deadlines and say, oh, we're going to be out by this month, or we're going to be free by this week. And then when it wouldn't happen, they would die.
Yes.
Because they had set up these kind of artificial deadlines for themselves. And
they die a day after.
Yeah, it was...
Like, they thought everything, all the problems would be solved.
Extremely disturbing book, but
I talk about like what the mind goes through in these experiences. He was a doctor that ended up going into the concentration camps and just being ridiculed every day. It was amazing read. I mean, so sorry, I usually don't share books, but I just thought,
it's all good.
Philosophy now. He got me going. Yeah.
All right, so question number 4. So what's a place in Nova Scotia that still surprises you every time you visit?
Well, there's a lot of them. Have you gone to the Margaree Valley lately? I mean, it's just just so beautiful when you kind of go up through it. It's, I mean, I used to always say, like, I love the South Shore of Nova Scotia. This is where I grew up. I ran the roads here and worked in all the little towns and played baseball up and down, whether it was in Yarmouth or Clark's Harbor or any of those little places up and down the shore. But Cape Breton is still like... like you say, it surprises me every time I go there. It's so extraordinarily beautiful.
It is.
And whether you're just driving around or you stop in Mabu or play golf at Cabot Links or go up to Benyon, I mean, it's fascinating.
One of my favorite places in Nova Scotia, and really honestly, in some respect, the world, is at the Glenora Distillery.
Oh yeah,
I just love being there. I just love being in there, sitting inside, listening to the water run through it, and having lunch. It's just amazing.
It is very nice.
Peaceful.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so here's a weird one. What's the weirdest thing you've ever had to pretend to understand while in a meeting? So someone's giving you lots of details, and you have to pretend to understand this in a meeting.
God, I don't know that I could actually answer that. I like to think I was pretty well briefed on things before I went in. There are things, kind of deeply technical stuff, especially with respect to like computers. I remember, talking to people about blockchain when it first came out, and thinking, like, why are they explaining blockchain to me? Like, I don't really know how computers work. Like, when I buy a computer system, I don't go in and say, I'd really like to see your code on the, I mean, I just want to know that I could use it. But with blockchain, for some reason, everybody feels like they have to know well, how does this actually work, right? Instead of what is the result, what is the application that this is going to allow me to do. So
good answer, right there.
Probably
that's a good answer.
Probably blockchain.
There you go.
That's good. All right, so we're going to ask you this because we also asked McNeil this. If you were to die and be reincarnated, what animal would you come back as?
Oh God. Don't know.
You can pick.
I will say a horse, and the reason for that is because if you ever read Animal Farm,
yes,
Boxer was the horse.
Okay.
And his motto was, "I must work harder."
Right. Yeah. I was going to say because they had big personalities. Yeah, there you go. Okay, next question. What's the biggest surprise?
Oh no, you skipped one.
Sorry. Did I?
Yeah, you did.
Which one is it, Matt?
Then the one on top of that.
Oh, thank you. Oh, cool. What's your ideal way to spend a day off?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to play golf. My wife and I love to travel.
Nice.
So
you said Spain earlier.
We were in Spain, cool. and we went to Granada.
Cool.
If you've ever been to Granada, it is. It's got this fascinating castle there that was built, by the Muslims back in the 16th century. And I found out an interesting thing about the Alhambra, which was the ceiling and a lot of the decorations in Alhambra was what inspired M.C. Escher.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
If anybody knows all the funky stuff that M.C. Escher drew, but he took his inspiration from that palace in Granada. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Granada. They had a one-day war or something like that.
No, I think you're thinking of somewhere else.
Didn't they have like a war? It was like one day or something? I think.
No, sure, man.
I don't know. Can't remember. I could be remember something different. Either way. So what was the biggest surprise to you going from opposition leader to premier?
Well, I think the biggest surprise, especially, I was leader of the opposition for 8 years. So I'd been through a number of minority governments. I had been the health critic before that. And there are times when you've been around that long, where you are convinced that you know the files of the ministers and maybe even some of the files the premier's handling better than they do, because you've just been around so long, and you've examined the in public accounts, you've examined the bureaucrats and all that kind of stuff, and what you very quickly find out when you cross the aisle is that the actual job is nothing like what it appears to be from the opposition benches. Because when you're in the opposition benches, you can pick an issue and you can spend a day just on that issue. Mm-hmm. And when you're in the premier's office, you've got 250 emails in your inbox before you get to work in the morning.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just don't have the capacity to be able to spend as much time as you'd like on every issue.
Right.
So it is a much more difficult, much more exhausting job than I think you. Even though you recognize how hard people in those positions, ministers, are working, it still surprises you when you get into that job and realize that this really is, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. Good answer.
Very good.
Okay. Easy question, maybe. A compliment or a strange compliment you've received from a stranger?
No, there's just all kinds of things that people, come up and thank you for. And so I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I would have considered strange.
Yeah.
I'm always surprised what people remember, because it might be something that was very, very minor to you. Or sometimes people will talk about something I did, and I'm thinking, I don't really remember. I don't remember that. So it's that kind of stuff that when people are thanking you for things that you don't actually remember. So maybe I did that. Maybe that's the answer.
That's a fair enough answer. Yeah. All right. I think this is the last one.
Last question. So, if someone made an action figure for Darrell Dexter, what would be it can be ridiculous, not ridiculous, but what would be the accessory that would come with it?
I don't know. It's a good question.
You're allowed to say that's a dumb question. That's okay. It's a safe space.
It would probably be a book of some kind.
Or,
I mean, that's, I used to always get a kick out of the fact that, my staff would come to me and they would say, like, we know we've been working you hard, and we know that, you've been on the road now for 14 days straight, so you got Thursday off, right? You'll have Thursday off.
Right.
Okay, great. And so on Wednesday night, the guy who used to drive me around would drive me off. And before I would get out of the car, he would hand me these massive, great big briefing books.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
And I would think to myself, so I don't actually have tomorrow off. I'm just working from home tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
Because that's just the reality of it. Like, you're constantly having to address the things that are going on. I got up one morning and my wife opened the curtains. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. She opens the curtains and she closes them, and she said, like, is there a reason, like, there's a CBC van in front of our house? And I just said, could be many reasons. So I literally call my communications guy and say, look, there's a CBC van out in front of my house. Any idea what that's about? And he says, yeah, you haven't listened to the news yet today. And I said, it's 20 after 6. No, I haven't.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, there was a shooting on your street.
Oh, gee.
And they just, obviously you live on the street, so they're going to be interested in what you think about that. So,
oh, my gosh.
So,
Premiers are living in dangerous areas.
Yeah, well, there you go.
But you know what? That speaks to the fact that I often say that, when people get upset that people aren't, in the house or in the ledge, 80% of the work is not done in there. Right?
Oh, yeah, no, for sure.
It just, there's lots of work that comes along that you don't have to be sitting to be working.
Oh, yeah. I used to say that the Premier's office was a little bit like an airport. Like, things kind of flew in through the door, landed on your desk. You had to deal with them, and then they took off, and they were, to hopefully they were to
get to their
destinations, right? So, but it was, it was at the same time one of the most exhilarating and most exhausting jobs I've ever had in my life.
Well, kudos to you, and thank you so much for your time. We part every episode with a piece of advice you were given in your lifetime. It could have been from anyone that you'd like to share with us and our listeners today, and then that's it. We'll land the plane. Okay, so I don't know who said this, but it is about how you think about other people and yourself. And that is, there is just so much good in the worst of us and so much bad in the best of us that it don't behoove none of us to talk about the rest of us. Hells yeah, I like it.
I like it.
Great.
Well, cheers
to you, my friend.
Thank you very much. We are. Thank you.
I hope we can do this again.
And thank you to the local public house.
100%. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.